3 in the morning, missiles in the sky, markets opening in a few hours, and Washington moving faster than Congress can breathe. If you think this is just another Middle East flare-up, you're already behind the curve. Hello and welcome. I'm Alex. For years, I've studied the intersection of economics and politics, and today we break down what's shaping our world. Before we go any further, if you care about understanding power, money, and the forces moving this country, to subscribe to the channel. Support independent analysis. We don't chase noise here. We decode structure. Now let's talk about what Americans are actually watching. Missiles over Tel Aviv are not just flashes on a screen. They are signals. Hezbollah rockets from Lebanon. Israeli strikes into Beirut. Iranian ballistic launches. U.S. interceptors rising. President Donald Trump calling in to describe a campaign that he says is ahead of schedule. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth outlining objectives. General Dan Keane declaring air superiority. Jennifer Griffin reporting inventory numbers that read like wartime spreadsheets. Brett Baier pressing for clarity. This is not chaos. This is coordinated messaging. But messaging is not the same as stability. When the sky is loud overseas, the system trembles at home. Oil futures spike before the New York Stock Exchange opens. Bond yields shift as investors price geopolitical risk. Insurance markets quietly adjust exposure models. So defense contractors' stock tickers flash green while consumer confidence surveys dip. The average American doesn't see missiles. They feel gasoline prices. Let's be clear about the structure of this moment. President Trump has framed this operation as necessary to prevent Iran from reaching nuclear capability and to dismantle its missile arsenal. That is the public objective. The underlying structure is broader. Restore deterrence credibility, reset regional power balance. It can signal to adversaries beyond Tehran that escalation has a price. Speed matters here. The administration emphasizes early leadership strikes, rapid degradation of missile infrastructure, swift operational gains. That's psychological warfare layered onto military action. Establish dominance fast. Shape the narrative before markets, allies, and enemies settle into their positions. But speed compresses accountability. Congress debates war powers authority while the campaign unfolds in real time. Senators like Tim Kaine question executive reach. Others cite Thomas Jefferson and the Barbary precedent. The constitutional tension is not academic. It determines how long this can last and who owns the consequences. And here's what most Americans intuitively understand. This isn't just about Iran. It's about system stability. It's about whether energy flows uninterrupted, whether the Strait of Hormuz remains open, whether Hezbollah's northern pressure expands the battlefield, whether fear at home begins to shift public psychology. The sky is loud tonight, but beneath the noise is something deeper, a recalibration of power. And when power recalibrates, markets move, alliances shift, and history turns. The three-part mission: decapitate, degrade, deny. What we are witnessing is not random force. It is structured force. Strip away the headlines in the political theater, and what emerges is a deliberate three-part campaign architecture. Decapitate, degrade, deny. Honey, this is not improvisation. It is doctrine shaped by 2 decades of post-9/11 warfare and refined through intelligence fusion, economic pressure, and precision strike capability. Let's start with decapitation. When President Donald Trump stated that 49 top Iranian leaders were removed in the opening phase, that was not a symbolic number. That was a structural strike. Former CIA Station Chief Dan Hoffman described the tradecraft behind it: human intelligence, signals intercepts, a overhead reconnaissance. The full integration of the find, fix, finish model. The goal is not revenge. The goal is disruption of command continuity. Power systems rely on coherence. Remove enough nodes at the top, and the chain of command fractures. Decisions slow. Fear spreads internally. Successors scramble. But here's the strategic reality. Decapitation buys time. It does not eliminate ideology. It destabilizes hierarchy, but it can also create volatility. When leadership collapses, the hardliners often move faster than moderates. Succession in revolutionary regimes is rarely smooth. So this first pillar is both tactical brilliance and strategic risk. Now to degradation. Jennifer Griffin's reporting laid out the inventory scale. Thousands of ballistic and cruise missiles, significant drone capacity, steady production rates before the conflict intensified. The missile arsenal is not just a weapon, it is leverage. It is Iran's primary deterrent tool against Israel, Gulf states, Mike's and U.S. bases. When Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth speaks about destroying launchers, storage depots, and naval assets, he is speaking the language of systemic dismantling. President Trump's comments about sinking vessels tied to potential Strait of Hormuz disruption signal something deeper. This is about preserving energy flow stability. If maritime choke points become vulnerable, oil prices spike globally. That translates directly into American inflation pressure. Degrading missile infrastructure is not just about protecting Tel Aviv. It is about protecting the dollar's stability, bond markets, and consumer confidence in Des Moines and Dallas. And then we arrive at denial. The third pillar is nuclear prevention. President Trump has framed this as the central justification. Prevent Iran from reaching deployable nuclear capability. This is where strategy intersects existential risk. A nuclear-armed Iran fundamentally alters Middle East deterrence equations. It emboldens proxies like Hezbollah. It forces regional arms races. It introduces long-term insurance costs into every energy contract and shipping lane. Denial is about stopping that future before it materializes. But here's the hard truth. Denial requires sustained monitoring. Airstrikes can damage enrichment sites. They cannot erase technical knowledge. If the regime adapts underground or decentralizes expertise, denial becomes an ongoing enforcement mission. Decapitate leadership. Degrade capacity. Deny escalation into nuclear status. Each pillar interacts with the others. Remove leaders too quickly without securing infrastructure, and chaos expands. Destroy infrastructure without addressing nuclear trajectory, and deterrence erodes. Focus solely on nuclear prevention without stabilizing the region, and proxy war continues indefinitely. This is why the campaign's success cannot be measured in days. It will be measured in whether the power structure in Tehran recalculates its cost-benefit equation, and whether American economic stability holds while that recalculation unfolds. The missile economy, stockpiles, burn rates, and the math of time. If you want to understand how long this war can last, stop looking at speeches and start looking at spreadsheets. War is not only strategy, it is inventory, it is burn rate, it is industrial capacity, it is cash flow under fire. Jennifer Griffin reported that Iran entered this phase of conflict with an estimated 2,000 long-range ballistic missiles and roughly 2,000 cruise missiles. Add to that thousands of drones, many of them inexpensive, adaptable, and difficult to intercept. Early in the escalation, roughly 500 missiles and around 2,000 drones were launched. That is not random aggression, that is controlled expenditure. Every missile fired is a calculation. Iran's pre-conflict production rate, approximately 100 missiles per month, tells us something critical. This is not a one-week arsenal. This is an industrial pipeline. That pipeline represents metallurgy, electronics, propulsion systems, foreign components, logistics networks. It represents money, and it represents time. President Donald Trump's projection of a 4 to 5 week operational window should not be read only as political messaging. It aligns with attrition math. If U.S. and Israeli strikes successfully destroy launchers, storage depots, and production facilities, the replenishment curve collapses. If they only degrade surface infrastructure while hidden supply chains survive, the curve flattens but does not disappear. This is what economists call a sustainability threshold. Missile warfare now operates under asymmetric cost dynamics. A drone costing tens of thousands of dollars can force a defender to launch an interceptor costing hundreds of thousands or more. Multiply that across thousands of launches, and you have a financial attrition model layered on top of battlefield physics. General Dan Keane emphasized that incoming missile rates have already dropped significantly. That suggests degradation is occurring. But attrition is not linear. If Iran disperses remaining stockpiles into hardened or mobile platforms, destruction becomes more expensive and time-consuming. If external actors such as North Korea, as reported in past defense briefings. Supply components or expertise, replenishment accelerates. Time becomes the decisive variable. Missile stockpiles translate into negotiation leverage. If Iran retains substantial inventory, it can continue to pressure Israel and U.S. regional assets. If inventory collapses below a credible deterrent threshold, Tehran's bargaining power erodes. In us, this is why destruction of production nodes matters as much as intercepting incoming fire. There is also a financial backstop question. Sanctions constrain revenue, but oil markets remain fluid. If Tehran can maintain export channels, formal or informal, it retains cash to sustain industrial output. If maritime disruption escalates and the Strait of Hormuz becomes unstable, global prices spike. Ironically, that could increase revenue per barrel, even under sanctions constraints. When war arithmetic is unforgiving, you measure missiles fired, you measure launchers destroyed, you measure production capacity disrupted, and you measure capital reserves. This is not just about how many rockets remain. It is about whether Iran's war economy can survive sustained pressure longer than U.S. political tolerance and market stability can absorb volatility. The math of time will decide more than any single airstrike, and that math is now running in real time. On air superiority isn't victory. The limits of precision power. Air superiority is powerful. It is not final. When General Dan Keane announced that U.S. and Israeli forces achieved local air superiority within 48 hours, that was a significant operational milestone. It means radar dominance. It means freedom of maneuver. It means strike packages can enter, hit, and exit with reduced resistance. It means intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms can map the battlefield continuously. But air superiority is a condition. It is not an outcome. The American public has been conditioned over 2 decades to associate precision strikes with decisive success. Since September 11th, as Dan Hoffman explained, the fusion of CIA intelligence and military capability has created an unmatched find, fix, finish system. Satellites, signals intercepts, human sources, drones, bombers, all integrated. It is technologically extraordinary. Yet precision does not automatically equal permanence. You can eliminate a commander. You cannot eliminate the institutional memory of a regime. You can destroy a radar site. You cannot erase the political ideology that built it. You can crater an airfield. You cannot crater resentment. President Donald Trump has insisted that there is a post-conflict plan. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has emphasized that this is not officially a regime change war. But here is the structural tension. When you remove 49 top leaders, when you collapse major command nodes, you are reshaping regime stability, whether you intend to or not. Power abhors a vacuum. In centralized systems like Iran's, leadership removal creates a scramble. The Revolutionary Guard structure does not simply dissolve, it adapts. Factions reposition, hardliners may accelerate, internal purges may begin. Intelligence networks go underground. Decision-making becomes less predictable. When air superiority allows you to strike faster than your opponent can reorganize. But it does not solve the governance equation that follows. There is also the economic dimension. Sustaining air dominance is expensive. Continuous sorties, carrier deployments, munitions replacement, maintenance cycles. This is high-burn military capital. Markets tolerate short bursts of conflict. They do not tolerate open-ended resource drains. Bond markets begin to price fiscal expansion. Watch insurance firms begin to model extended instability. Defense appropriations increase while domestic spending debates intensify. Air power is efficient at breaking things. It is less efficient at building what comes next. History reminds us of this pattern. Tactical supremacy can coexist with strategic ambiguity. The battlefield can be controlled while the political end state remains undefined. That gap in between operational success and strategic closure is where long conflicts are born. General Dan Keane's declaration of dominance signals capability. It does not guarantee conclusion. The real question is not whether the United States and Israel can control the skies. They clearly can. The question is whether controlling the skies translates into altering Tehran's cost-benefit calculus in a durable way. If air superiority forces recalibration, shortens production cycles, fractures leadership cohesion, and accelerates diplomatic leverage, it becomes a strategic asset. If it only suppresses symptoms while deeper power structures regenerate beneath the surface, it becomes an expensive holding pattern. Air superiority wins space. Strategy must win time. And time is the resource every side is now fighting to control. The northern fuse, Hezbollah, Lebanon, and the risk of multi-front drain. The most dangerous wars are not the ones you see coming straight at you. They are the ones that widen quietly. While Washington debates constitutional authority, and while President Donald Trump focuses on degrading Iran's central command structure, the northern border of Israel has turned into a pressure valve. Hezbollah is not a side note. It is the fuse. Trey Yingst has reported that Hezbollah retains as many as 12,000 rockets. That number is not symbolic. It represents layered saturation capability, short-range rockets for constant harassment, medium-range projectiles for strategic targets. Whilst the purpose is not necessarily precision, the purpose is pressure. When Israeli forces strike inside Lebanon, including targets near Beirut, they are not just retaliating. They are signaling that proxy warfare will not remain insulated. Hezbollah's financial and logistical lifeline runs back to Tehran. Senator Ted Cruz has made that connection explicit, describing Iran as the primary sponsor of Hezbollah's operational strength. Remove Tehran's capacity, and the proxy weakens. That is the theory. But theory meets reality in geography. A multi-front conflict stretches resources in ways single-theater wars do not. Israel must allocate missile defense systems north and south. Civil defense networks remain activated for extended periods. Economic activity slows in affected regions. Insurance premiums for infrastructure rise. Investors reassess regional risk exposure. Even if interception rates remain high, the psychological toll compounds. Multi-front pressure is not always about winning territory. It is about exhausting bandwidth. From a structural perspective, Hezbollah's role is strategic leverage for Tehran. If Iran's direct missile capacity is degraded, Hezbollah's arsenal becomes the fallback deterrent. It allows Tehran to externalize escalation while preserving plausible distance. That is the financial and military efficiency of proxy strategy. Outsource risk, retain influence. But prolonged northern engagement carries escalation risk. If Israeli strikes intensify deep into Lebanese territory, regional actors recalibrate. Gulf states that have publicly condemned Iranian missile launches must also weigh domestic pressures and economic exposure. Shipping routes in the eastern Mediterranean become more volatile. Tourism collapses. Reconstruction costs rise. History shows that multi-front conflicts rarely end cleanly. They either compress into decisive diplomatic breakthroughs or expand into drawn-out attrition. The danger is not just military overstretch, it is economic bleed. General Dan Keane has emphasized operational progress against missile infrastructure. That may reduce direct Iranian pressure, but if Hezbollah's 12,000 rockets remain operational, Israel remains under persistent strain, and persistent strain affects investor confidence, sovereign credit ratings, and foreign direct investment flows. From a systems standpoint, the northern fuse is a timing mechanism. If it burns fast and is extinguished quickly, regional stability recalibrates. If it burns slowly, drawing resources month after month, the conflict shifts from decisive campaign to grinding contest. President Trump's broader objective is deterrence restoration. That requires convincing not only Tehran, but also its proxies that escalation is too costly to sustain. Watch, the northern border will reveal whether that deterrence equation holds. Because sometimes the real test of strategy is not the first strike. It is the second front. The Homeland Shadow, terrorism, fears, DHS funding, and Austin war powers, and the Constitution. The fight inside Washington wars test enemies abroad. They also test constitutions at home. As missiles fly and President Donald Trump directs operations against Iran's leadership and missile infrastructure, a parallel battle unfolds inside Washington. It is quieter, procedural, wrapped in legal language, but it is just as consequential. It is the fight over who decides when America goes to war and for how long. Senator Tim Kaine has argued that congressional authorization is required under the War Powers Act. His position reflects a long-standing concern: executive overreach in matters of armed conflict. The Constitution grants Congress the power to declare war. The president, Whereas commander-in-chief directs the military, that tension is intentional. It is a built-in friction point designed to prevent impulsive conflict. But modern warfare moves faster than 18th century parchment. President Trump and his supporters argue that he possesses inherent constitutional authority to act decisively against imminent threats. They cite precedent. Thomas Jefferson confronted the Barbary pirates without waiting for a formal declaration. More recently, President Barack Obama conducted operations in Libya without explicit congressional authorization. The executive branch has steadily expanded its operational latitude over decades. This is not merely legal theory. It is about ownership of consequence. If Congress votes to authorize force, it shares political accountability. If the president acts alone, responsibility concentrates in the Oval Office. That concentration can project strength abroad, but it intensifies scrutiny at home. Markets watch this dynamic closely. Political instability in Washington often amplifies financial volatility. Investors prefer clarity. Divided authority introduces uncertainty. The deeper structural question is duration. Short, decisive operations often avoid congressional confrontation. Extended engagements reopen the constitutional debate. Funding becomes leverage. Hearings multiply. Public opinion fragments. Senators like Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton defend the necessity of decisive action. Others warn of mission creep. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth emphasizes operational objectives, while critics demand defined end states. This is not purely partisan, it is institutional. Executive speed is essential in modern conflict. Intelligence windows close quickly. Target opportunities evaporate, yet democratic legitimacy requires oversight. When these two imperatives collide, Washington becomes another arena of strategic friction. There is also an economic layer. War appropriations affect deficit trajectories. Defense spending increases. Bond markets assess long-term fiscal discipline. If political infighting signals prolonged conflict without clear authorization, risk premiums rise. The cost of borrowing inches upward. Domestic priorities compete with military allocations. General Dan Keane can declare air superiority. Jennifer Griffin can report operational gains. But neither can resolve the constitutional calculus. That responsibility rests with elected officials navigating power boundaries defined more than 2 centuries ago. The American system was designed to resist concentrated authority. It was also designed to survive external threats. Balancing those principles during active conflict is never clean. The fight inside Washington will not decide whether missiles are intercepted. It will decide whether national unity holds under pressure. In unity, in prolonged conflict, it is as strategic as any weapon system. Money, oil, and the system. What this war does to prices and power wars are fought with weapons. They are financed with energy. When missiles rise over the Middle East, oil traders do not wait for press conferences. Futures contracts adjust instantly. Tanker insurance premiums reprice overnight. Currency markets react before most Americans wake up. The battlefield may be thousands of miles away, but the transmission mechanism runs straight through your gas pump and your mortgage rate. President Donald Trump has framed this campaign as necessary for long-term security. That may be true, but in the short term, every escalation injects volatility into the global energy system, and volatility is a tax. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most critical maritime choke points on the planet. A significant portion of global oil flows through that corridor. When Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth references neutralizing naval threats, he is not just discussing military objectives. He is addressing systemic financial stability. If maritime routes are disrupted, even temporarily, global supply tightens. Tight supply raises prices. Rising prices feed inflation expectations. Inflation expectations move bond markets. When bond yields rise, mortgage rates rise. When mortgage rates rise, housing slows. When housing slows, consumer confidence follows. This is how a missile launch over the Gulf can ripple into a stalled home purchase in Ohio. Larry Kudlow compared this moment to historical turning points. Decisive action that reshapes geopolitical equilibrium. That is one possible outcome. Markets often reward clarity. If the campaign is swift, contained, and conclusively degrades Iran's missile and nuclear capacity, Energy markets could stabilize quickly. Risk premiums would compress, capital flows would resume. But markets punish duration. If Hezbollah escalates further, if Iranian drone attacks persist, if shipping lanes become contested, if insurance underwriters expand exclusion zones, then volatility becomes embedded. Companies begin to hedge long-term energy exposure at higher price levels. Transportation costs rise, food prices follow. Central banks face renewed pressure between fighting inflation and preserving growth. There is also the fiscal dimension. Sustained military operations require appropriations. Senators Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton argue that security justifies the expense. Critics worry about deficits. Treasury issuance increases. Global investors assess U.S. debt sustainability. If geopolitical risk rises, while fiscal discipline appears uncertain, the cost of capital inches upward. Power in the modern era is not just military, it is monetary. The dollar's dominance rests partly on stability. If conflict expands unpredictably, competitors seek alternatives. When energy trade denominated outside the dollar, even incrementally, shifts leverage over time. Strategic rivals observe closely. Economic warfare does not always involve sanctions. Sometimes it involves opportunity. Jennifer Griffin reports operational developments. General Dan Keane describes air dominance. But beneath those updates lies a deeper question. Can the United States project force without destabilizing the financial architecture that underpins its global power? With short conflicts compress shock. Long conflicts institutionalize it. This war is not only a military equation, it is a balance sheet, and the system is watching every movement. The strategic forecast, 3 doors. America walks through next. Every war creates a crossroads. Not all crossroads look dramatic. Some look like press briefings. Some look like market charts. Some look like Senate hearings. But history moves through decision points. And right now, the United States stands before 3 strategic doors. The first door is controlled deterrence restoration. In this scenario, President Donald Trump's campaign achieves its core objectives. Missile production nodes are severely degraded. Launch capabilities are disrupted faster than they can be rebuilt. Leadership fragmentation inside Tehran forces recalibration. Hezbollah's pressure tapers as the cost curve rises. Energy markets stabilize once it becomes clear that maritime routes remain secure. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth frames the operation as mission accomplished within defined parameters. General Dan Keane's air superiority transitions from active suppression to monitoring posture. Under this path, the message to adversaries is unmistakable. Escalation will be met with decisive structural response. Markets reward clarity. Oil volatility compresses. Bond yields stabilize. Congress, including critics like Senator Tim Kaine, shifts focus from authorization debates to oversight and reconstruction diplomacy. This door leads to a short, sharp conflict that reinforces deterrence without institutionalizing instability. But the second door is prolonged regional escalation. If Iran adapts faster than expected, if missile dispersal proves deeper than intelligence suggested, if Hezbollah sustains sustained rocket fire across northern Israel, if proxy networks expand rather than contract, then the campaign stretches beyond early projections. President Trump faces growing pressure to define an end state beyond degradation metrics. Senators Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton argue for staying the course to prevent unfinished deterrence. Critics warn of mission creep. Energy markets begin pricing extended risk. Insurance costs rise across shipping lanes. Investor caution becomes persistent rather than temporary. Duration transforms perception. What begins as decisive action risks morphing into entanglement. Not because of battlefield failure, but because strategic closure remains elusive. The third door is domestic fracture. This path is less visible, but equally powerful. War fatigue collides with economic sensitivity. DHS funding debates intensify. FBI Director Kash Patel's Homeland Security investigations operate under heightened scrutiny. Partisan rhetoric sharpens. Constitutional authority debates under the War Powers Act resurface repeatedly. Markets interpret political division as strategic uncertainty. Consumer confidence erodes. Fiscal deficits expand under sustained defense appropriations. The strength projection abroad becomes overshadowed by cohesion stress at home. This is the door every adversary hopes America walks through. The strategic forecast is not about predicting which door opens. It is about understanding the variables that influence the choice: speed, clarity, defined objectives, financial discipline, congressional alignment, controlled messaging. These are not abstract political ideals. They are strategic assets. Jennifer Griffin will continue reporting operational developments. Brett Baier will continue pressing for accountability. Dan Hoffman will analyze intelligence implications. General Dan Keane will speak about capability. Secretary Pete Hegseth will frame objectives. President Donald Trump will project confidence. But ultimately, victory is not a headline. It is a condition: security that holds, energy markets that stabilize, a constitution that remains intact, and a public that believes the cost paid was proportional to the danger removed. America now stands at the threshold. The next steps will determine not only the outcome of this conflict, but the resilience of the system itself. What we have just walked through is not simply a story about missiles, military strikes, or political debate. It is a story about power, how it is projected, how it is financed, how it is justified, and how it is tested. President Donald Trump launched a structured campaign built on three pillars: decapitate leadership, degrade missile capability, and deny nuclear escalation. General Dan Keane declared air superiority. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth outlined operational intent. House Senators Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton defended decisive action, while Senator Tim Kaine raised constitutional questions. Jennifer Griffin reported the numbers. Brett Baier pressed for clarity. Kash Patel addressed domestic security vigilance. But beyond the names and positions lies something bigger: systems under stress. This conflict revealed how modern warfare is no longer isolated to battlefields. It moves through oil markets, bond yields, shipping insurance, domestic political unity, and constitutional boundaries. It tests whether deterrence can be restored without destabilizing financial order. It tests whether leadership speed can coexist with democratic oversight. It tests whether a nation can project strength abroad without fracturing confidence at home. The deeper lesson is this: power without structure collapses, and structure without accountability erodes trust. In geopolitics, as in personal life, its decisions made under pressure reveal the integrity of the foundation beneath them. For everyday Americans, the application is simple but profound. Understand systems. Don't react only to headlines. Follow incentives. Ask who benefits, who pays, and how long the model is sustainable. Whether in investing, career planning, or civic engagement, the same principles apply. Short-term emotion must not override long-term structure. Here's a quick question for you. Which factor do you believe will determine the long-term outcome of this conflict? A. Military dominance and deterrence. B. Economic stability and domestic unity. Comment A or B below. And more importantly, what is your view? Do you believe this strategy strengthens America long-term or risks deeper instability? Share your perspective in the comments so others can engage and learn from different viewpoints. If you value sharp, or a structured analysis that connects politics, economics, and real-world impact, subscribe to the channel. Your support fuels deeper reporting, stronger insight, and the next critical conversation.